Our Lady of Nazareth. The abbot Orsini wrote, "This image was honored at Nazareth in the time of the apostles, if we may believe a writing which was found, by a hunter, attached to this image, in the year 1150. The shrine of Our Lady of Nazareth, known in Portugal as Nossa Senhora da Nazaré, is found in the village of Nazaré on the Atlantic coast in Portugal. Indeed, the village is named after this miraculous statue of the Blessed Mother and the Christ child that was brought to the area many centuries ago. According to tradition, this miraculous image was carved by the hands of Saint Joseph, the foster father of Christ, while in the very presence of the infant Jesus and the Mother of God. Later, the faces and hands of the images were painted by Saint Luke the evangelist. This remarkable image is still preserved in a church where it can be viewed by anyone, and the story surrounding it is a fascinating one. It is known that the statue of Our Lady of Nazareth came from the Holy Land, where it was one of the oldest images ever venerated by Christians. It was saved from destruction at the hands of the iconoclasts sometime early in the 5th century by a monk named Ciriaco, who gave the statue to Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome later gave it to Saint Augustine in Africa, to protect the statue by removing it from the Holy Land. Saint Augustine then gave it into the safekeeping of the monastery of Caladiana, near Merida, a monastery on the Iberian Peninsula. When the Arabs invaded the Iberian Peninsula in the year 711, King Roderick met them with his Visigothic army at the Battle of Guadalete, where he was soundly defeated. It is a fact of history that the body of Roderick was never found upon the field of battle, although his horse was found, and it is often assumed by historians that Roderick died that day when he lost his kingdom. According to this legend, however, Roderick was not killed, but survived the battle and disguised himself as a beggar as he traveled north. Alone and unknown, he made his way to the monastery of Caladiana, where he sought shelter for the night. Going to confession, he of necessity revealed his true identity to the friar, Friar Romano. As it turned out, the monks were preparing to leave the monastery in advance of the Arabs, and so Friar Romano asked the king if he could accompany him in his travels. Roderick agreed, and the friar took with him the statue of Our Lady of Nazareth and the relics of Saint Bras and Saint Bartholomew. They traveled together until they arrived at a place later named Monte di Saint Bartholomew in the year 714. They made for themselves a hermitage with the friar living in a small cave at the edge of a cliff that overlooked the sea. He placed the image in a niche among the stones upon a pedestal of simple rocks. Roderick went a little ways off by himself to a hill where he also began to live the life of a hermit. After a year, though, King Roderick left the hermitage, and nothing else is said of him in this legend. One wonders if he ever learned of his kinsman Paleo, who had retreated into the mountains and continued to heroically defy the invaders. Before his death, Friar Romano hid the image in his small cave, where it remained undisturbed for some centuries until it was discovered by shepherds, who came there to venerate the statue. Inside that little, ancient sanctuary they had found the renowned and sacred image of Our Lady of Nazareth. Carved in wood, it was unlike any other statue of the Madonna they had ever seen, for it depicts the Blessed Virgin breastfeeding her divine child while seated upon a simple bench. When miracles began to frequently occur, it became a major pilgrimage center. Then, in the year 1182, the mayor of Porto de Mos, Dom Ferus Rupinho, was hunting on his land when he observed a deer. Chasing it up a steep slope on horseback that misty morning, the fog became heavier all of a sudden. The deer, later suspected to be the devil in the guise of a deer, jumped off the edge of the hilltop into the empty void. Despite his efforts to stop his horse, the spirited mount was determined to follow after the deer. Helpless to save himself, the rider suddenly recognized that he was near the sacred grotto where he would often come to pray. Ferus Rupinho cried out to the Blessed Virgin, praying aloud, "Our Lady, help me." The horse stopped immediately, as if he were digging his hooves into the rocky cliff above the void. Suspended in an unnatural manner at the edge of the cliff, Ferus Rupinho knew the drop to be over 100 meters, and surely would mean his death if he had fallen. He was then able to back slowly away from the edge, looking down to see the evidence of the impossible and unimaginable, for there in the hard stone was the imprint of one of his horse's hooves. One of those marks can still be seen in the native rock. Father Rufino dismounted and went to the grotto to pray and give thanks, subsequently causing a chapel Capella da Memoria, or the Chapel of Remembrance, to be built very near the spot where his life had been miraculously saved. When the masons he had hired took apart the primitive altar in the cave, they found an ivory box of sorts that contained the relics of St. Bras and St. Bartholomew. There was also an ancient scroll that they carefully removed. Opening the scroll, they found that it explained the history of the statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary and her divine child, now known as Our Lady of Nazareth, as outlined above. The church Santuario di Nossa Senhora da Nazaré was later built on the hilltop overlooking Nazaré by King Ferdinand I of Portugal in the year 1377. Its construction was necessary due to the large number of pilgrims who continued to come to venerate the image. Over the years it was often rebuilt, or had additions made, especially in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. The profusely decorated and gilded apse displays the statue of Nossa Senhora da Nazaré in a lighted niche above the main altar, flanked by twisted columns. The first king of Portugal, Don Afonso Henriques, as well as the chief nobles of his court, were among the early pilgrims to the shrine. Many notable figures came to visit Our Lady of Nazareth throughout history, including Vasco da Gama, who came as a pilgrim before setting out for India, and Pedro Álvares Cabral, who later discovered Brazil. St. Francis Xavier, the Apostle of the East, went on pilgrimage to Our Lady of Nazareth before later leaving for Goa. According to a plaque placed in the chapel in 1623, the image was carved by St. Joseph in Galilee when Jesus was a baby. Some decades later St. Luke the evangelist painted the faces and hands of the images. It remained in Nazareth until brought by the Greek monk Cyriaco to the Iberian Peninsula. It is believed to be one of the oldest images venerated by Christians. Amen.